So have you ever felt like you were missing out on your life? That you weren't living up to your potential? That somehow there was something more that you were born for and you haven't yet found it? I'm Jeff Goins, and that's what my new book, The Art of Work, A Proven Path to Discovering What You Were Meant to Do, is all about. So when we think about our life's purpose, I think that there typically are two extremes. There's the extreme of just kind of pull yourself up by your bootstraps and go after it. All you need is a plan and a set of goals, and you can just go for it. And this is the myth of the self-made man or woman, that you can do anything that you want to do, just go for it. But the truth is, we know that life doesn't always work that way, that if you aren't born with a certain set of abilities or opportunities, that you might not be able to achieve anything that you want to achieve. And that's actually a good thing. Now, the other extreme is sort of the fatalistic extreme, that whatever happens to you just happens. Whatever will be, will be. And that's not true either. I think that in between those two extremes is the path to your purpose, the way that you can find your calling, create your life's work, and leave a legacy that matters. In other words, your life is a mystery, but you can also miss out on some of the most important parts of it. And I think a lot of us already suspect that. You know that something's happening and you're kind of missing out on it. And in this book, that's exactly what I talk about. I outline the 7 different stages that you can intentionally go through that are both full of mystery and practicality, meaning that there are things that happen to you, but the way that you choose to respond to them in many ways dictates your success. So a few years ago, I made the leap from going from being a full-time employee of a nonprofit organization to becoming a full-time writer and entrepreneur. And for the past few years, people have been asking me to write this book to share the lessons that I've learned on this journey. But honestly, I've never really felt qualified to do that until now. And when I started writing this book and started doing research, it ended up kind of being this story about just me and all these things that I'd done. I didn't quite feel right about that. So what I did was I went out and I read a bunch of biographies from famous people who had led lives of extraordinary influence and left amazing legacies. People like Walt Disney and Mother Teresa, all kinds of people who were living interesting lives, and people remembered them for the contributions that they made to the world. And I thought, man, these are people who really found their calling. And in addition to that, I went out and interviewed hundreds of people and hand-selected just a handful of them to share their stories with you of everyday ordinary people who are leading extraordinary lives and giving you an insight into what does a life that responds to a calling look like today. And so that's what The Art of Work is full of. It's full of these stories, each illustrating a different principle. So there's 7 chapters or these 7 different stages, and each chapter represents a different person, and then some historical examples and other examples that you might be familiar with. But the whole idea is so that in these stories and in these different stages, you can see pieces of your own story, and you can feel empowered to know, okay, I understand the direction of my life, and the way that that works is not so much coming up with some big idea, but rather listening to your life, looking back at the things that you've experienced and looking for clues buried in your past that will tell you about your future. And that's the way the process works. That's the way it's worked for me and all of these other stories that I'm going to share in the book. But my hope is in reading these stories, you're going to understand, okay, there's a path that you're already on, but it's going to give you some signposts that you can recognize along the way that will give you clarity so that you can continue to take action to reach your life's work. And here's the really interesting part. Once you answer your calling, that's just the beginning. Your calling is just the process of beginning to understand, why was I born? What was I created to do? And now that I begin to do that, how can I lead a life of impact and influence? So not too long ago, a friend emailed me saying that she was recently promoted at her job, going from one set of responsibilities to a whole other set of responsibilities. And finally she just had to stop and realize, oh my gosh, I'm succeeding at the wrong things. And that was a sign to her that it was time to move out of one career path and get on another. And that was hard, but it was life-changing for her to make that realization. And I think the fear that we have, or that we should have at the end of our lives, is not that we would be afraid of failing, but rather afraid at succeeding at the wrong things. Regretting, looking back on our life and going, oh my gosh, I dedicated my life to things that ultimately didn't matter. So how do you not do that? Well, I think it begins by following in a path of significance that many people have gone ahead and forged the way for us, and we can follow in their way. And what is that way? I think it's this. I think it's the art of work, these 7 stages that I share here. These aren't my ideas. These are observations based on research, personal experience, and also in encounters with people who are living lives of significance now. And I hope that you don't miss out on this reason that you were born, this reason that you are alive. I hope that you find your path, and I hope that the art of work helps you get there.